Looking for a cosmic adventure like no other? Zatswan, Multiversal Guardian is a high-stakes comic book journey through the multiverse with stunning art and an unforgettable hero. Get your copy today in ebook and paperback formats. Link in the description.
Hello everybody, this is Neil Allen, the artist behind this book here, Zatswan Multiversal Guardian, which you can purchase on Amazon in the link below. You can either get it in paperback form like this copy, or you can get it in ebook. If you have Kindle Unlimited, it will essentially be free. You just have to download it. So I wanted to talk about the art of Zatswan because it's something that I sometimes get comments on. And one thing, people tend to appreciate it, which I like. And one thing that gets brought out is how unique it looks. And I wanted to talk about, that and how it came to look the way it does. Honestly, I never set out to get a particularly unique style. I just drew and did art, and this is just the way that it came out looking. I would say the thing that really sets Zatswan artwork apart, probably more than anything else, is that it's done in a traditional hand done style, not using much many digital methods. And for me, I don't have anything against like digital artwork or digital artwork tools. I think they're very useful, and it's not that I never make use of them. I do when it comes to like concept art and just coming up with character designs and things like that. I don't tend to prefer working that way just from a tactile point of view. I just prefer, for one thing, it's not as intuitive. And another thing too, all other things being equal, I don't think digital art tends to look as good as hand-drawn or hand-painted artwork does. And it's not nearly as fun, just it's not as fun. The tools aren't as fun to explore, for me at least, and they're not as fun to use. But I guess the way that I got into doing artwork this way is that my brother used to do artwork, and he moved away, but he like left in his old closet, he like left some art supplies, and I raided that closet, pulled out the supplies. I even still have some of them. And this was a while ago. This is a long time ago. And I never looked back. I've just been doing a lot of artwork ever since. And I have gotten some pushback on that, like talk about, oh well, your comic looks weird because you do it this way, or you're using colored pencils or a crayon or something like that, as if it's something bad. And to me, that's just sort of a sign of ignorance. This is the reason why, because you can criticize, like, maybe my usage of those tools wasn't as good as it could have been, but there is nothing actually wrong with those tools in of themselves, and there's nothing wrong with using them. But you do hear that a lot, like, this doesn't look like your typical superhero Marvel and DC comic, as if there's something not good about that. Now, I will give this to Marvel and DC in that particular type of look. Yes, they have developed what we would call an industry standard at this point doing that, because they've done it so many times, like comics that look like the way that Marvel and DC comics look. However, and I do understand that even a lot of indie comic book artists try to get their work to look like that typical superhero Marvel and DC stuff, that house style, because that will be a mark of it looking professional. So they're trying to get their comic to look like what we artists would call, or something that's like mass market type of art. And I do that. That is a method that can be taken to get your foot in the door, especially if you want to like work on Marvel and DC comic books, or like work for some of their contemporaries in that sort of direct market industry. However, if we look at the most popular comic books in the world, like literally the most popular ones in the world, um, they do not tend to look like what we might call a mass market comic. And we can go over we can take some specific examples like Dav Pilkey's Dog Man, for example. Now, if you look at Dog Man, does it look like typically what you would see in a comic book? Definitely not, but it does look unmistakably like Dav Pilkey's work. Like, you will recognize Dav Pilkey's work. Will you recognize who generic DC or Marvel artist is just by looking at them? Maybe like some super duper fans can recognize some, but a lot of those artists are so interchangeable that you will not know who they are. And we could Dogman's not the only example we could take a look at. We could also take a look at One Piece, for example. Does One Piece look like your typical mass market comic? Definitely not. But does it unmistakably look like One Piece? Definitely. We have plenty of other examples like One Punch Man. And even if we go through the decades even at Marvel and DC and look at some of their most popular artists, like starting with Jack Kirby. He didn't look like anybody else but Jack Kirby. His style was unmistakable. Same with Steve Ditko. Unmistakable style. These guys literally invented some of the most popular comic book characters that are still enduring today. Frank Miller, like these are like the most popular, the most influential comic book creators, and they look unmistakably them. Same with Todd McFarlane and same with Jim Lee. By the time you start getting up into the 2000s, that's when like that Marvel and DC stuff was on a big downturn. And I would say nothing changed as far as like comic artists being unmistakable and not adhering to like, industry norms. The thing that happened is that the most popular comic artists were no longer at Marvel and DC. You would find them elsewhere, like the examples that I mentioned, like Dog Man, like One Piece, like One Punch Man, and so on and so forth. You just didn't find them there. And what you find at Marvel and DC now is like the most generic, the most like interchangeable, you know, uh, stuff that, while it is sound, I will say, like, the artists I wouldn't say are bad. It's just that, it looks like that. And good for them, they are probably, the editors want it to look like that, and that's completely understandable. But I don't think it's necessarily good for the artists for them to be so, um, you know, interchangeable and lacking in any type of style. So weirdly enough, yeah, like having that type of mass market, um, industry standard look can get your foot in the door, but think about it like this. Is it gonna make you a superstar? In and of itself, probably not. I would weirdly say, and I'm not saying this just to put myself over, this likely has a greater chance of, rising to that sort of level than your typical Marvel or DC looking thing. I think that they would this at least is not going to get lost in, the mix. Whereas their work, stands to not stand out. Um, but yeah, this is the artwork of Zatswan. This was done largely, the mediums used largely colored pencils, watercolors, and that's just the way that I liked to do artwork, like I said. traditionally, and apparently, yes, it's given it this really unique look. Now, the interesting thing, I understand that my perspective isn't necessarily the one you'd want to take because I'm the one who created this, but interestingly, this doesn't even look that far out to me, but I'm so used to seeing this, and this is just naturally what I do. But I do recognize it does look different than your typical DC or Marvel comic, which is actually like something that I am proud of, to tell you the truth. And I think it's something that works mainly in Marvel and DC's. I'm sorry, that works mainly in Zatswan's favor to be apart from that. But here's what I would tell comic book creators, anybody who this may inspire, which I hope it does inspire some people. The thing to do, if you want to be like a real superstar, in my opinion, is to develop your own style. Like for me, this just came about naturally, but here's the interesting thing. There might be people who don't like my artwork, and that's perfectly fine and perfectly understandable. But for somebody to come out and say, hey, Neil, you're a terrible artist, you don't know what you're doing, that would just expose how ignorant they are on the subject. I've been doing this long enough now. I've been doing it enough. Yes, there are still things to learn, that it's a constant journey, but I think I kind of know where I sit in things, and while some people may not like my work, and that's fine, I do know that anybody who really knows artwork is going to be able to tell that there is an inherent level of artistry here, regardless of what you may think of some of the stylistic choices that display that, okay, this person knows what they're doing. They know anatomy here. Let's see, they know, I'm just going to take it, looking for a good example. Okay, they understand like 3-point perspective here. And I think I'm a pretty good storyteller, just a pretty good sequential storyteller. Like everything comes across clearly. So I developed enough craft to where even if people don't like some of the stylistic choices, like you have some foreshortening here, I have enough of an understanding of craft that there's an inherent level, instantly recognizable level of artistry in the work. So get your own unique style, but build your craft enough to where you're still undeniably a sound and good artist, so that you have that foundation of craft in your work. So that even if people don't like that I did this with colored pencils, I still nailed this very difficult angle, and this I still nailed that, with this figure here from a difficult angle with another figure in there as well. So they have to work together. This figure has to work with this figure at this like top-down angle. That's not an easy thing to do. That takes literally skill, that takes know-how, that takes craft, that I think is the thing to do. So if people like say, hey Neil, you're terrible. I mean, can you do that? I mean, it's not, well, I mean, some people out there I'm sure probably could, but something like this angle here, this takes, it takes, you don't just do that. Like there's a lot at play here, from perspective to just lighting, the way the colors work, where you're going to put down your shadows. There's a lot at play here that a lot of people don't even think about, but all that takes skill, all that takes know-how, all that takes learning. Are there still things to learn? Yeah, definitely. And the trick is to never stop learning, keep learning stuff. But yeah, it's to have that unique style, but have that foundation of technical ability and craft in there, so that your work is you would be an undeniably good artist. But I think that's all I want to talk about as far as the art right now. We could have some other discussions on artwork and Zatswan in the future. If this book does look interesting to you, be sure to pick it up at the link below in the description on Amazon, and share this content with others, like, subscribe, and leave comments, and I will Hopefully talk to all of you again very soon. Take care.